Hey, everybody, it is Richard Harris and Scott Leese here with another episode of our podcast. But of course, first, as always, we have a special guest announcer for our sponsor. So I'm going to go ahead and run that through for a second. Then we'll introduce you to our guest.
In this world, you need leads now, and Lead 411 has got your back. What is Lead 411? A fucking great lead provider. Lead 411 has unlimited mobile direct phone numbers, intent data via role changes, jobs, and company intelligence. Critics are calling them sensational. And don't forget their slick Chrome extension that plugs into LinkedIn. This summer, step up to the big leagues and join the most comprehensive sales intelligence solution in the market. Lead 411.
We should actually run the video. I should actually share the screen so people can see him do that. But the best.
It's funnier when you see him doing
Yeah.
it. You realize he's an actual human.
Right. And of course, the reason we did this is because Scott, who loves sales scripts, didn't know how to actually read a good script, didn't know how to practice it and make it his own, be authentic. So our sponsor, Tom Blue, which we appreciate, went out and did this. And of course, we love it. So, but without any further ado, it's not about Scott. It's not about Richard. It's not about our deep voice guy. It's about Jacqueline Nicholson. Jacqueline, thanks for joining us today, and give people a little bit of background on you. What's your title? Where are you at? What kind of sales cycles are you used to? Just so they have context as we have the conversation today.
Yeah, for sure. The crowd goes wild. Jacqueline Nicholson's here today, calling in from Northern California. Gosh, I have sold almost everything. So I've sold hardware back in the day. I'm selling IoT wearables right now. I've sold software. I've sold things that defy a category, subscriptions before they were subscriptions. And so I think I've seen sales cycles from, getting an order in a week or two and something that, took 10 months to come to fruition. So I've done a little bit of it all. Been carrying a quota formally for 20 years and quite a few customer-facing things before that. So done a little bit of it all. It's and actually I started sales in the .com heyday. So I am not 27, and actually used to work in the pharmaceutical and biotech industry before I ever started selling.
But how did you get into selling? Because as you told us before, you have a engineering degree or computer science degree or something like this. Like, how did you end up becoming a salesperson?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I have a bachelor's and a master's in engineering from the University of Illinois. And some point in that journey, the way I put myself through grad school was to be a teaching assistant. So I taught drafting to freshman engineering students. And it was in the days when AutoCAD was first being created. And so I taught drafting in AutoCAD to these freshman students. And I really liked being up there talking to people, educating people, and having a platform to be on to talk with people. And so I took note of that. I really liked speaking in front of people. I liked doing that. And when I landed my first job out of school, it was as a sales engineer. And I was enjoying it, but I seemed to, I realized that the folks who were selling were having a lot more fun than me. And because of the experience I had super early in my career, wound up working for a big pharmaceutical company, and really loved the mission. It was Johnson & Johnson. I was working for J&J, loved it. And I ended up taking a role after working in clinical research and development over for J&J corporate. And I worked for this really interesting fellow. So at J&J is a definite hierarchy. You work for a manager who works for a director, who works for a VP, who works for another VP, who works for these people. It's like very specific. I get this role in this group at the corporate IT organization. It was called New Business Development. And our job was to figure out how J&J was going to take new technologies and use them for their business. And mine in 1995 was the internet. So I was like, oh, what's the internet? Well, we had a handful of scientists at J&J who were accessing the internet through a dial-up connection, and yet a few people experimenting across the organization. And we realized very quickly that this was an interesting technology. So I actually reported to a director, which is in and of itself unusual. My director gets called into a special project. So now I'm working for a VP and I have a cross-functional team around the world. basically people in Australia, people in Belgium. And it was my job to kind of figure out how J&J was going to use the internet. So we launched at that time jnj.com and baby.com. And I worked with trademark and patent attorneys at J&J Corporate to get our domain names back. Somebody had stole bandaid.com or monostat.com. So that was my world. I was in my 20s. It was the weirdest time of my life. And I had a VP who was just very empowering to me. So, you know, my director was, look, get forgiveness, not permission. And I worked for a VP who told me to keep the purchase orders at the level he could sign for and just to manage the project. So it just sort of unleashed me in doing this. And so I'm having the time of my life, but guess whose name was at the corporate switchboard at Johnson & Johnson for any vendor calling in about the internet?
You.
Me. I got calls, 50, 60, 70 calls a day, because think of this, email between companies wasn't a common thing. Yeah. And so I got phone calls all day long, vendors wanting to meet with me. So I would decide who I would meet with. I would listen to their presentations, and I literally wanted to fall asleep or, you know, smack somebody, because it was just about how great their product was, how great their product was. And I remember sitting there thinking, do you even know what we do here? Like, do you know what J&J is? Do you care what we are? Do you know what we make? Can I quiz you? I just wanted to set up a vendor quiz.
So
anyway,
is there one, and feel free to drop a name, particularly if they've gone bankrupt. But is there one in particular where you're like, oh my, like, you know, yes, all these were terrible because they were all about them, right? Like in sales, we know you don't talk about yourself, right?
Yeah.
Is there one in particular that sticks out where you were like, oh my God, like time literally stood still, and, you know, I almost, you know, died and sort of decomposed sitting there?
Yes, it was the internet service providers were the worst. So remember ISPs, like, I don't even know if these guys even exist today, because it's like a utility. And we saw this as a utility, because my job was to go around to heads of VPs of IT and finance at J&J operating companies and explain to them how this was going to be great, that everybody would be able to access the internet from their work computers. And most people were pretty cool. Others were like, well, people will just waste their time with that. That doesn't seem like a good idea. Like, we can sign up for benefits. They can do things. Anyway, it was internet service providers like MCI, which is out of business. But my bottom line was, I sat there and I kept thinking, so what? You're the fastest. You have the best IBM was like trying to sell me on their hardware, and we wanted to buy Sun hardware, which doesn't even exist anymore. And so I just remember the so what factor. And I talk about that a lot. And so when I went into sales, because I learned from that process that I absolutely, from going out talking to these executives around J&J, I was basically selling this internal project. And I loved it. I never felt so vibrant. I was like, that coupled with the grad school experience was like, I need to be in sales. And I had a great mentor at J&J who said, well, nobody's going to just hire you into a quota carrying role because you've never done this. And so we kind of created a path for me to kind of move from where I was at J&J, go to a company where I could be like a consultant, a client partner, get that client facing experience, and then slowly pivot. And that's what I did. But the driving factor was, besides the energy that it gave me, was the so what factor. And so I swore I would never sell the way I was sold to, because it was awful. It was awful. It was all about them.
You literally sold the internet.
To J&J. I mean, the concept of using it. Yeah.
It's pretty wild. 1995, I was a freshman in college, and I had no idea what the internet was.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird to think about.
I was selling classified ads at a newspaper.
I have a question for you, and it's something that we have not had a chance to talk about, maybe ever, on the Servant Sales podcast. And that is, what makes somebody a good sales engineer?
Oh, that's for me, like, this is just my perspective, and I've worked with so many amazing sales engineers. Like, I think of, Robert Unger, Ryan Ivanovic, people who, without ever letting anybody know that they're doing it, are just absolute lethal salespeople. So they are uncovering problems and pain, and like turning the knife, twisting the knife just a little to make it hurt a little more. So you think about probing questions, you think about uncovering pain. That's what a good sales engineer will do without even really necessarily realizing it themselves.
How is that different?
And then
How is that
creating
different
it
from what a good
value.
AE will do, though?
Yeah, but see, everybody knows that the AE is trying to sell something. Nobody really thinks that the sales consultant or engineer or, whatever companies call them these days, they don't think they're being sold by those people, but they are. But in a way that is creating value, in a way that's solving problems, and it's not trying to be shady. It's not trying to be, it. To me, it looks like a sales ninja thing. And to them, it's not. They're just trying to solve a problem. And to me, that's what sales is anyway, right? It's solving a problem. That's what engineers do. So my old CEO at Percolate, Noah Breyer, just loved people who had became sales out of being engineers, because he's like, engineers are the best salespeople because they solve problems, and that's what salespeople should be doing.
So, so does it make sense that, the sales rep, the AE is the bad cop and you're the good cop as a sales engineer? Is that sort of the old school play or still the current play?
I've seen that dynamic before. I don't think it really works today. I think transparency wins the day today. And I think that's, to me, the best sales engineers are just transparent people. Like, like in sales, if somebody asks if this is a problem, you're going to say it differently as the AE. You're going to go, well, you'll spin it a little bit. The sales engineer's like, no, we can't do that.
Right. What,
And we're sitting there going like, oh no, did he say that?
so,
Did she say that?
so when does a company need a sales engineer in the process,
Yeah,
right?
that's what I want to know. What is
How
Mm.
complex does it need to be that you need and maybe it doesn't need to be complex, because to your point, there's this transparency that occurs when you bring more people. Like,
Yeah.
the more people you bring to support your sales, the better the customer or prospect feels, simply because, oh, they see there's this organization and smart people behind the salesperson.
Yeah.
But
This is such a fun conversation, because I hadn't even thought of this, but I would say my gut reaction to that is when it's a very technical sale. So if your sale is to an IT organization, a security organization, it's a technical sale, you should have, solutions consultants or sales engineers, whatever you'd like to call them, because I don't want to be selling, a cloud solution or a spam filter or any kind of IT sale without somebody like that at my side, because I don't want to be an expert in the products the way they are. But when it comes to, if I'm selling to a marketing executive, because I've sold to all different types of buyers. So, and this is in no way a reflection of these people, but my least favorite sale is to IT. I love IT people. It's just that's not who I've really enjoyed selling to, not because of anything they've done, but I just don't necessarily resonate. So for me, when I've sold to marketing executives, when I've sold to M&A professionals, when I've sold to business development executives, when I've sold to the C-suite, that tends to be a better spot for my skills. And in those scenarios, in those solutions, you don't often need a sales engineer until you get to the evolution of the company where you need it. So at Percolate, when I was there for several years, in the early days as AEs, we demoed the software ourselves.
I want to
We
pause
would
for a
bring
second.
in,
Wait, I
yeah,
want
sure.
to, when you said when you hit
An
evolution,
evolution in the company
yeah,
or the product.
what does that mean?
Yeah. So what I'm thinking about a startup. So at a startup, a lot of times AEs will wear many hats. So the company I'm at right now, which is Kinetic, which is a fabulous company, I wear many hats. So I will talk more in depth about the product, and I know when to bring in a CTO or somebody from the product team. But there's no concept of a sales engineer at our company in our evolution and growth right now, because we don't need that just yet. So we're not at that point in our growth. So when I'm talking about the growth of a company or the evolution of a company, as you grow, as volume goes up, as the sale becomes more detailed, is when you start to, at least what I've seen
But
in
what do
my
you mean?
experience.
So what's that difference though in detail? Like, to your point, you go from evolution to now it becomes more detailed. What
Mhm.
kind of detail?
Well, when people start talking about GDPR compliance, for an example, or if they're talking about, security logs, or, doing SOC compliance and things like that, a lot of AEs, if we're technically minded, we can handle a certain level of the discussion. But as you start to sell to Fortune 500, Fortune 100, Fortune 50 customers, the sale becomes so complex that you don't want to do it alone. It shouldn't just be the AE representing the product anymore, right?
Right.
So I
How
think
do
it
you
has to
know
do with customers as well as the growth of the company.
what I'm going to flip it on you.
It's okay.
What How bad is it when an AE just sort of sets a meeting and then says, "Hold for sales engineering, hold for Jacqueline." right? Like you still see, and so my last sort of real job where we were working with sales engineers was 2011 and 12, and we were
Mhm.
doing API management, and that was still considered pretty cutting edge of the internet at that stage of
Mhm.
the internet, like where
Right.
basic companies could do APIs that they didn't realize they had, right? So our sales reps, to your point, were very tech minded up until a point. But
Mhm.
occasionally you would sort of see that rep come in and go, well, just, no, I don't know. Hold on. Um,
I've
is
never
that
done
good? Is
that.
that bad? What's that?
I've never done that. I would rather say to someone, I don't really know the answer to that, but I can get that answer to you and get back to you.
Which
That's
we
what I
did.
prefer to do.
I was, I've just sort of seen sometimes AEs become the SDRs for the sales engineers, right? Um,
I don't want to do that.
yeah, I
I don't want to
agree.
do that.
I agree. Um, how's
Uh,
it been, being on the tech minded side, right? And going to go a little deep on this, but uh, both in sales and in the engineering side, being a woman in this role, because I think oftentimes it's seen as a male dominated role on the tech
Mhm.
side. We're starting to see great things like, girls who code and, some of those things. How is that through your evolution? Because as far as I'm concerned, you're an OG. Like I'm sitting here going, why weren't you the CEO of Google or Yahoo at some point, right? Like that sort of, if you were doing this stuff in 95.
I don't know. I should talk to them about that. I think I can go back. Nah,
Sure.
I think from my perspective, I define success very differently. So to me, success is being the woman my husband would marry again. It's being the mom that my kids are proud to introduce to their friends. And it's being the person my boss would hire again. So I define success in ways that is very much about, am I the person I aspire to be? And if I am that person, I can have wild success in the midst of some of the most trying times. So, when I was in engineering school and when I was in this field, yeah, it was male dominated. But I think, you know, I I refuse to play a victim card for any reason. I can't control that I'm a woman. I can't control where I was born or what color my skin is or what creed I come from. I can just control being the best version of myself. And so it kind of breaks my heart when I see people wanting to claim some sort of victim status for whatever reason. We have enough problems in the world where people truly are discriminated against, that without like sort of making it up on the fly or crying poor me. I think that for me, the most frustrating part of my career was when I was probably too immature to realize how to handle it properly. But you do experience situations where you're sitting at a conference room table and you try to speak up and you're just talked over. And if you exhibit the same behavior that the person who just did that, you're a bitch or you're aggressive or you're this or you're that. And I often found that like the feedback you get from people was kind of hilarious. So if I was really vocal and forward, I was too aggressive. And then if I was really trying to tailor it to this, I should speak up more. I was like, oh my God, like I can't keep up with this shit. Like, let's just be ourselves. Can we just be us? Is that okay? Can we just
So how do
like,
you go back and either give yourself some advice, and granted, it's very, the early 2000s and late 90s was very different
sure.
to
Oh
what it
yeah.
is now. Now is better, right? Now is better than I hope than it used to be. But what advice would you give to, the woman who's sitting here listening to this, whether they're a salesperson trying to get promoted, maybe a sales engineer who's running into this same challenge? Um, what kind of advice would you like to give yourself back then or now?
I would, well, so I am who I am today because of all the decisions and choices I've made, good and bad. And I love who I am. And so I don't regret anything in my past that has led to where I'm at today, because it's all part of that tapestry that's been woven. And I believe that really strongly. And the reason I say that is because it actually came, I used to travel a ton, from like 2008 to 2014, like more than half my time outside the country. And I remember picking up a newspaper at one point. I don't remember what year it was, but it was there was a Garrison Keillor column in it, and it was called, the title of the column was "The Pictures on My Phone." And he was talking, it was a column talking about his cell phone. It's like an old flip phone. He had a grainy sort of bad quality picture of his granddaughter on the phone. And he sees the picture and he's writing about how he's thinking about his life and all the stupid shit he's done. And like, oh, I fucked up. I did this, I shouldn't have done drugs or whatever, whatever it was. And he was just like, but then I look at the picture of my granddaughter And how can I regret anything in a chain of events that led to her existence? And that just smacked me like upside the head. I was like, wow, what a radical perspective. And so I try to adopt that. There are times when I regret or think this or that or the other thing. So while I wouldn't give myself any advice, I would give somebody like me advice. Don't overreact and like make decisions when you're upset. Like I've made a lot of decisions in my life when I was upset. I probably would have made better decisions had they not been based on emotion. That's the one thing that I strive to do differently is, you know, some people call it like the geographical cure. Like, I'm really unhappy in my job, so I'm going to leave my job, or I'm really unhappy with this, so I'm going to do this. It's like, if you're really unhappy, you're probably just unhappy, and you should work on that first and then make your decisions. So that's why, like, my focus is around being the person I aspire to be, as opposed to, you know, I want to, I'm going to do all these things and have all this money and then I'll be happy. No, I want to be this person, because when I am that person, and this is what I teach people I mentor and coach, is if I am that person, if I'm the best version of Jacqueline I can be, I'm going to do the right things and I'm going to have a lot of success. And so that I kind of pivot it. I flip it on its head.
I'm gonna go dig in a little bit more on this, and
Sure.
then I'll let Scott ask some questions because I know I'm dominating.
Scott's like, what the hell, man? I want to talk.
Yeah,
Not even,
dude.
Okay.
This is my freaking podcast. What's going on?
You're going into my space of mental health, which is, my thing, a thing of mine. But for advice, right? What I'm really trying to get, and I love that perspective on life and owning yourself and own it, and I love that story about the granddaughter, and I literally just took a note on that. I thought it was beautiful. But let's say I am this salesperson who is getting spoken over in a meeting, who is not being heard. What advice can we give them so that they can feel comfortable finding the right way to be heard? Yes, there's some internal stuff we all need to do, right, that we can all get better at, but I'm looking for something tactical, aside.
Sure. Oh, totally. I got a great tool. So think of a big capital U, right? So usually those things are going to involve a difficult conversation, right? You got to get to the heart of the matter. So start by being authentic in who you are. So whatever you're good at, whoever you are, be authentically that. So you start those difficult conversations. So it's with a boss, it's with a colleague, it's whomever, a customer even. And you have to do it. You've got to start very positive. So let's say, I have an issue with, I was supposed to get a raise and I didn't get the raise. So I got to talk to my boss. Like, Bob, I love working for you. I've learned so much of this company. I pride myself on being a team player. I work really hard, and I kind of find myself in this situation where I feel like I'm damned if I do and I'm damned if I don't. And he said, drop the little bomb on the table for a second and just be quiet. Like, well, what do you mean? What are you talking about? Well, here I am. I find myself in this situation. I don't really know how to handle this. And so you start positive and you're getting to the heart of the matter. And where I say people should pivot to the heart of the matter, you don't say, hey, Bob, I love working for you. All these things are going well, and I think that, I'm really happy in my job, and as soon as you say, but, people sort of forget all of the positive stuff you just said. So you transition with, my concern is, if I demand the raise, I look like a jerk. But if I don't fight for myself, that seems very weak to me. So I'm just seeking some clarity here. And so when you get to the heart of the matter and you use phrases that are very soft like that, my concern is this, I'm just seeking clarity. And then, that conversation is kind of at the bottom of the U where you're going to get to the heart of the matter. And as you transition away from it, you have to end positive. So that's the big capital U, and you end on a positive note. It's a really great tactic. It works with your kids. It works with your spouse. It works with your boss. It works with your customers, because you're not skirting around. You're not bullshitting somebody. You're telling them good things about you, about them, about the situation. You're getting to the heart of the matter, and you transition away. I'm really glad we had this conversation. This relationship, this company means a lot to me. Sometimes sparks fly, iron sharpens iron. So one man sharpens another. Some sparks fly when iron sharpens iron, but I feel like we're in a better place, and I really appreciate you. So that's one way.
In sales, we just call that, a shit sandwich, right? A compliment followed by the shit, followed by another compliment.
I didn't know it was a shit sandwich. Riv, it's the shit sandwich. Riv taught me the capital U. I'll have to tell Riv it's a shit sandwich.
But, I now prefer the U, because it is more genuine and authentic to the human nature of it. So thank you. I'm going to stop now so
Well, I
Scott
will
can
add
ask
one thing to
his.
what you said, though. Like, I don't ever recommend people stay in toxic situations in a work environment. Like, I had a friend that I was coaching who was literally working for an insane person. I mean, crazy shit.
Well, so it's
And
hard
We've
for
done
someone
that.
to know what toxic means, though. If you're
yeah,
in it, like toxic to me means something different than toxic to somebody else. So how are you qualifying an environment as toxic beyond, let's say, beyond obvious, which is like a verbally abusive type situations? Like, what other things qualify as a toxic work environment to you that somebody should run from?
I think if there's a lack of integrity in senior executives or in your line of reporting, like people are willing to lie or people are willing to do things that sort of color outside the lines a little bit too far. You know, it's, I have I have family members who work in the wine and the cannabis industries. And it's like a lot of times when cannabis wasn't legal, people were, it was the black market or, the gray market. And now that it's legitimate in a lot of states, you still have people who are willing to color outside the lines and do shit that they shouldn't do, like fudge lab numbers or do stuff like that. Like that's like, if it's bordering on that, that's maybe that's too obvious, but that's a big one. To me, if the rules aren't the same for everybody, like the shit that bothers me in bad sales leadership would be, okay, we have territories and these are the rules. These are how you have accounts and these are deals and these are the rules for splits and these are the rules for payment and all of that, right? You have a comp plan, you have the rules. It's when a sales manager gives a deal to somebody that they shouldn't. Like I've had that happen to me and you just go, did you seriously just do that?
Yeah.
And you announced it on a team conference call. Like that's fun.
I literally just had this conversation a couple hours ago with a client of mine about creating rules of engagement and sticking with them and avoiding the sort of lobbying back and forth where people want an exception and all of that kind of stuff. So
I'm a big believer in the rule of law. Like justice has a blindfold and a sword. Like she doesn't give a shit about your emotions or your feelings. It's the rules are the rules, and they may be painful, but they are fair for everybody. If you apply them equally, if you have the equal protection under our little rules of comp and engagement and accounts, you're going to be fine.
I want to ask you what I think hopefully will be a slightly difficult question if you're open to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
You just spoke my language.
Yeah. So you have this interesting mix to me of long stints, 6-7 years, and very short sub 1 year stints. So I think it's interesting because like, here you are, you've been in sales and leadership for a long time. And it's like, well, we still fuck up too, and pick the wrong horse, so to speak. Right. Can you talk a little bit about like why that you think that that's happened, on more than one occasion, and what are the things that you maybe didn't learn the first time that you still didn't learn the second, or now you've learned after a couple of those?
Oh, for sure. You're talking about more recent stuff, I assume, correct?
Yeah.
So, when I was at Percolate, which I will work for and with the founders of Percolate and anybody I worked with at Percolate again in a heartbeat. In fact, I'm working with somebody now that I worked with at Percolate. So I've known him for 10 years. So I really aspire to work with the right team. And so when I left Percolate, it was kind of at a part of the evolution of the company. It's an excellent company. And then, see, people talk about regrets. It's like, if I was a regret-minded person, I might say like, hey, maybe I should have stayed at Percolate. I don't know. But I didn't leave. I didn't. Yeah, I was there a while.
You were at Percolate for almost 4 years.
Yeah, but this, what I'm telling you has a relevance to the question you asked. So anyway, bottom line, I left on great terms. Like I said, I still in touch with everybody and would work there again. I followed somebody from Percolate to AlphaSense. It was somebody I had worked with at 3 different companies. So we'd worked together at Gerson Lehrman Group. We'd worked together at Percolate, and then we went to work together at AlphaSense. So I was invited to come to AlphaSense, and I was thrilled to do it. And I viewed it as, I'm going to try this for a year to see if they need me. So my superpower is building rapport with very senior executives and to handle very large strategic deals. So I'm not good at, hunting 1,000 accounts or 10,000 accounts or 600 accounts. That's not my specialty. My specialty is dealing with a handful of very large customers and dealing with very senior people. That's what I'm really good at. And so I went to AlphaSense. It's like, hey, I'm going to come here for a year and see, like, do you need somebody like me? They did not need somebody like me. AlphaSense is a great company. It's an excellent product. I love the people there. They did not need me to close, $8,000, $10,000 deals every month or every other week. It's not my strength. Great product. I love it. I would actually like to have a license to it. It's awesome. So I stayed there for a year, and somebody I met from this community of podcast individuals. So Scott Ingram, who has sales success stories. I've spoken at his summit in Austin. I've been a guest on his podcast. I'm one of his co-authors. And somebody I met through that community, David Weiss, invited me to join ADP. And I said, you're out of your mind. I don't want to go to ADP. It's a huge company. That's not my specialty. I'm really good at startups and small companies. He's like, oh,
You
you'll
mean
love it.
compared to Johnson & Johnson, it's a huge company?
Well, hey, J&J was like in the 90s, dude. Come on. Like, that's another lifetime. So, but anyway, working for J&J is an awesome freaking company. It's a great company. Anyway, so I went to ADP. I love the people there. It just was not a good culture fit for me. And then, and I had the opportunity.
Hold on. How do you love the people there, but it's not a good culture fit? Help me understand.
So it's the way that you have to get things done. So there are nice people working there. They're good to work with. Like, I worked for a great person. I had great teammates, but just getting anything done at ADP, and this is not a knock against ADP. I mean, it's a fine company, but it's just, you had to, I don't know. I think the people who are most successful at ADP, and like I said, I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but I think you have to start at ADP when you're very young and kind of grow up there. People who come in from the outside, there's like family secrets or something. It's very strange. And you said earlier you hate them, so I think your mic is gone. Are you there? Can you hear him, Richard?
You guys hear me?
I can now.
I can, because you came off mute. That's the first time Scott didn't do that after he rails on me.
Richard, after 7 months, your bad habits.
No, and I don't mean to use imprecise language. So it just wasn't a good fit. And in the face of a decent fit where it's like, it's a nice place to work, I could have made it work. But then somebody I've known for 10 years says, I really want you to come and work for me. I'm not going to say no to that, because remember, one of my things is I want to be the person that somebody would hire again. And so being privileged to work with Kiva Kolstein and for him at GLG, at Percolate, at AlphaSense, and then being able to work with Paul Giske at GLG, at Percolate, and now at Kinetic, I'm not going to pass that up, because I want to work with my tribe.
That's really cool. I love that. By the way, that's the best definition of culture I've heard after everybody spouting about it for 2 or 3 years. Is, it's not about the people you like, it's about what does it take to get something done in the company. That and can you live with it, right? Like, they're like, I was never the political guy. I could never be successful, I don't think, at a place like Salesforce where you have to play that game. But there are lots of people who are, and that's, hats off to them. But that really,
and they love it. It's a good company.
And they do. And by all means, some of my closest friends work. I'm going to pivot a little bit. I want to come back to some stuff you said earlier about you being your best you defining, and I loved your quote of, I always want to be the woman my husband wants to remarry, or the mom my kids, don't want to be embarrassed by, until they're teenagers, I think. But how do you do that? Like, how do you take care of that mental side of you? Because it does take effort, in my opinion, for some, well, let me rephrase that. For me, it has taken effort, and now I'm much better at it. And I've done my therapy, and I've talked about all this stuff before. But what are the things you do to really make sure you're there and present about those things?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm a person of very deep faith. And so for me, God is really important. I can't really do anything without him. So that's the number one thing. So it's my faith. So I try to have some habits that help me with that. So number one, it's like this book right here is my journal. And so I try to spend quiet time every morning, reading and reflecting and kind of thinking about the big rocks for the day or the week. So before the week starts, we kind of think about what are the big rocks that go in there. You guys have heard that Stephen Covey exercise where you put the big rocks in you have rocks, you have pebbles, you have sand in medium-sized rocks. If you put the sand in first, like all the little shit like emails, you're not going to fit the big rock like your marriage or your kids in. So big rocks first. And so I try to prioritize that. And my coach, so I work with an executive coach I have since 2013, and he was the person who gave me my first quota carrying role. And we coach and mentor people in our spare time together, in like evenings and weekends and stuff. And early mornings, sometimes at 5 a.m. He taught me that, Jacqueline, this guy you're so upset about, is he going to go to your funeral? I was like, whoa, that's a deep question for a Tuesday. That was when he said it to me. And I was like, probably not. He's like, hey, why don't you give it the appropriate energy? So it's about prioritizing. It's really easy to get upset and frustrated at things you can't control and give them your energy and then snap at your spouse or your kids or your dog or whatever. And those people are not going to be at your funeral. So that perspective to me is really important. So the quiet time, the prioritizing things that really matter. And so I almost died in 2017 of leukemia on a business trip with my CEO, Noah Breyer, and with TJ Bonaventura and Manas Kulkarni. If you're listening, I love you guys. We were seeing the CMO at Verizon outside of DC. We were in New Jersey first with a bunch of meetings. I wasn't feeling well. Decided to go to urgent care, and they got antibiotics, and we fly to DC, and I'm just getting worse by the minute. And I'd been feeling ill for about a week and a half. I had a really bad flu. This is bad. Woke up in the morning. I was like, I think I should go to the hospital. So doctor told me if I'd gone back to sleep in my hotel room, I would have died in my sleep. And he told me if I had taken an ambulance to GW instead of going to the community hospital, I would have died in the ambulance. So I was about an hour and a half away from dropping dead. And that is something I think about, not to be depressing, but more like, you know what? This stuff isn't so bad.
Yeah.
This stuff is not so bad.
I mean, it certainly provides perspective on everything. I'm not sure if you know, but I spent 4 years in the hospital in my early 20s.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Fighting for my life. And I had 2 emergency surgeries and had the priest come in and,
dude,
do the thing for me and talk to my parents because they didn't think I was going to make it out and all this kind of stuff. So,
jeez,
I can
it
relate.
gives you a lot of perspective. It really does.
It really does, and especially around your comments about like, well, I'm not really going to worry about that thing. I'm going to let that thing slide. That person won't be at my funeral. It's like, it's a lot easier to focus on the things that matter, when you've had an experience like the one that you're describing,
Yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
and a lot of people have those experiences. It's. I remember thinking in the hospital, and when they gave me the diagnosis, I was like, "Wow, I have radical clarity at this moment right now." Woo, shit, that cleared my head. Like that. Don't worry about that. I don't worry about that. I was at UCSF for 30 days.
That's where I was for a lot longer than 30 days, but that's the same.
Oh, we'll have to talk about UCSF sometime. I have a feeling
on hospital food and things like this.
I actually had good food, but anyway. Yeah. So to me, it's just like, that's how I maintain that perspective. And look, I fall, like I have my days where I have a pity party or I, bitch at my boss or about something and, but I usually snap out of it pretty quick. Yeah. Probably because of that perspective,
Real one last question before we try to wrap up and get out of here. What is your advice? Sure. What is your advice for somebody who's seeking a mentor? How does somebody go about finding the right mentor for them in your mind?
Well, so I think, mentors are really important. And I think they're different things to different people. I really have a lot of respect for people who have asked me to be their mentor and really worked at it. So a lot of times people will say like, hey, would you be my mentor? And they look for help, but then it's kind of, they don't really follow up or they don't really show much initiative. There's this woman I met through the Sales Rebellion, and she and I have had a couple of calls, and she just kind of asked me like, would I be willing to catch up with her now and again? And her name's Karen. She's like, I'm not going to give her last name because I don't know if I have her permission to do that, but she's just on the ball. Like she will text me, she'll check in with me, she'll see how things are going. She's transitioning from working internationally. She moved back here with her husband right before the pandemic. And it's like, what a freaking nightmare, she's in the middle of now. She's like, I didn't think it was going to be like this. Like, nobody did. And so she's like, awesome. So I would say if you seek out a mentor, it's a very personal choice, and you're going to kind of know who you want to mentor you. Like, I know I want to talk to you guys again, not necessarily that you'd be my mentors or anything, but like, when you meet your tribe, you've met your tribe. Right. And I have been so blessed by the people I've met through this experience of the pandemic, and, even in my sales walk, it's kind of cool. And if you're going to seek out somebody as a mentor, my advice to a person seeking a mentor is don't be lazy. Don't be lazy. Don't just expect somebody to hand you something. Like, take the initiative, reach out to the person mentoring you, follow up with them.
Yeah.
Don't be lazy.
Well, what can we do to help and support you, Jacqueline? Is there anything that comes to mind?
I think, the thing I'm passionate about is helping other people. And I would just say to you, if you have somebody in your sphere, in your circle of influence, and you're worried about them or you're thinking about them that day, do me a favor and reach out to them when you think of it. Because you never know. Like, somebody could be really having a bad time, a rough day. And sometimes the universe puts out a little signal to you you thought of someone and you should reach out to them. And I am very passionate about something that has been brought to my attention during this pandemic, which is this kind of crisis around the world around human trafficking. And I am just sick of it. And I hope people will just be aware of it and wake up and fight it.
Is there a particular organization there that you throw your support behind that people could check out to learn more about this crisis?
Well, the one organization I know has been doing some good work and so I come from a military family, and my husband was in the military, and there's this group that's Veterans for Child Rescue. I don't know enough about them. I'm not endorsing them, but I just know that they're trying to really do some good work. And that's the one I'm aware of, but it's just, just the subject in general, just being aware of it. And if you see something, to try to help somebody, because depending on where you live, it can be an issue right around you. And I think it's even funny, like you'd see notices in bathrooms or billboards that you didn't used to see, right? It seems like more people are getting aware of it. And maybe that's a depressing topic to think of, but I think it's one we should be caring about, Yeah,
I absolutely agree. It's very interesting. And I think it's in every community, as much as I hate to say it, right?
Yeah,
To some
it
extent.
is.
And to a certain extent, it's not just the trafficking, it's just sort of the exploitation of most likely women, but not to say that it doesn't happen to boys and men. So I agree with you 100%. Well, thank you so much.
Let's fight it together. We're good people. Let's fight this shit.
Well, thank you.
I have to tell you guys, this was one of the most interesting podcasts. You guys are awesome. I love this. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I really appreciate it. This was fun.
Fascinating for me. Like, tons of like old school knowledge with some simple answers for me. That's what I'm getting out of it. So I loved it as well. I would love to talk to you again, offline or online. Like, I don't care.
I love it. Definitely. Let's do it. You guys are awesome. Keep doing the work you're doing. It's amazing. And these connections right now, I think that's been the hardest thing for me since March. Is I'm a connector. I'm a people person. Like, I like to be with people. And this is a crappy substitute, but it's a pretty enlightening one and an energizing one when you've got nothing else. So I wish I was with you guys in person, but this was pretty cool. So thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. And of course, we got to give a shout out to our friends over at Lead 411. If you don't know who it is, go back to the beginning and listen to the really cool deep voice guy who does it better.
Lead 411.
That's pretty good.
That's really good. Yeah. In fact, maybe we should make all our guests read our do it. So
there you go. I love
thanks, Jacqueline. We appreciate it.
Right. You got it, guys. Have a great weekend. Okay.
You too.
Have some good wine or something.